this issue. First, we have Dr. Agnes Kalibata, the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy to the 2021 UN Summit. And we have Isabel de Saint Malo, the former Vice President and Foreign Minister of Panama, and of course, our host today, Ms. Susana Malcorra, the head of GWL and former Foreign Minister of the former, excuse me, I'm not sure why, excuse me. I apologize. We have Susana Malcorra, our final panelist, who is the former Foreign Minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Worship for Argentina and former Chief of Staff to the Secretary General of the United Nations, and a member and co-founder of GWL. The bios of each of these women is so long that their titles alone will lead us into this conversation today. And I just want to jump right in, starting with you, Susana. If you can give us an overview of why GWL was launched and why and how women's voices have been used to move forward issues like the one we're talking about here today, and the importance of women leaders participating in this dialogue. Why don't we start from there?
Thanks, Ertharin. And first of all, thanks, Agnes, for availing yourself. I know what you have gone through hosting this summit, in fact, with the Secretary General, but you taking the weight of it. So it's really, really good that you availed yourself. Thanks so much. Thanks, Isabel, and thanks, Ertharin. You know, we came together, we are 55 women now in our group, in our Global Women Leaders, Voices for Change and Inclusion. We came together, it will be 3 years in March 1920, because we felt that we needed to connect two issues that are critical in our perspective. One of them is women's empowerment, and the other one is multilateralism. And why we felt that we needed to make that connection, because we saw that women's empowerment that was so high in the priorities after Beijing was starting to lose steam. Not only was starting to lose steam, it started to have some pushback from certain corners. And that was happening at the same time the multilateral system was being challenged, to being questioned. So we felt that the weaker the multilateral system was, the less opportunity for a gender perspective on policy issues we had. And so we brought together 55 women, all of us, you yourself, Ertharin, Isabel also, have been involved in the multilateral system, have held many of us positions in our governments. So we know the value of those two coming together. And we also felt that each one of us had a voice, but 55 voices talking at once in really in agreement was much more powerful. And that's what we do. We advocate for issues that have value, have importance for the multilateral system and for a gender perspective. And this is one of the key reasons why we are here today. Mm-hmm. Because without any question, food security, food systems is at the center of a sustainability, is at the center of resilience, and women have a role there that is absolutely central. And knowing that the food system summit was taking place, we felt that it was only right for us to come together and have a conversation on what happened in the food system summit, and Agnes, I'm sure will take us through, mm-hmm. but also in what we see is necessary coming towards the future, you know, what we need to do from here on.
Mhm. Well, as you talk about food systems at the center, can you speak a bit, because you've had such a wide-ranging set of roles between having worked in the UN, having led as chief of staff for the Secretary General, and then as foreign minister for your own country, to talk about how the interrelatedness between food systems and the Food System Summit, the Paris Accord, the SDGs, because right now we're not achieving any of our goals. And so to speak to the interrelatedness and why it's important that interrelatedness is recognized by leaders across the globe.
Well, let me start by citing the Secretary General. He said in his remarks to the Food Security Summit something that I would like to highlight. He said that food systems have sort of three attributes, three responsibilities. One is to support the health and well-being of all people. The second one is that food systems have to protect our planet. And the third one is that food systems must support prosperity. And I mentioned people, planet, prosperity. Those are the three themes of the Agenda 2030. So he made the connection, the immediate connection with his introductory remarks between development, sustainable development, and food systems. And in his remarks, he included a specific reference to the aspect related to the planet. So he himself brought this to the forefront. It's clear that so far we have somehow managed questions related to food in a very, very silo approach. We have essentially approached these issues from a very narrow lens, different lenses, the agriculture lens, the biodiversity lens, the climate lens, the water lens, but we have not been able to bring them together. And in my view, the problem is that food has been essentially a question handled by the ministers of agriculture in most countries. And this is a political issue. It's an issue of political nature that is at the heart of what governments need to manage. That's why my suggestion, and I think that's what we should do next, is to make sure that we keep the momentum created by the Food System Summit, raising the profile of the issue and keeping it at the head of the state, of head of government level. Mm-hmm. They are the only ones who can really make the trade-offs that are necessary to ensure that the priorities are set right, that they address the developmental questions, the sustainability questions, the climate change questions, and that also in making those trade-offs, we understand how different countries and different regions need to support each other in order to move forward. And I will argue here, just as an example, agricultural subsidies is one of the elements that needs to be put in this basket, but it's a large and complicated basket. And I'm sure some will say, if you do it like that, you will only add complexity. Let me say straightforward. This is a complex matter. It's not going to be addressed easily unless we raise it at the political level and we connect the dots. We will not be able to really move towards the future in the way we need.
Well, that's connecting at the political level to connect the dots. Well, that will take us right to our next speaker, Dr. Agnes Kalibata, who has spent the last 20 months working to raise the profile of food systems and succeeded with the significant number of heads of state and foreign ministers who participated in the dialogue. Dr. Kalibata, thank you for what you have, for the time that you've given. As you remind us on a regular basis, you have a day job. And yet, you embraced and fully committed yourself to making this Food System Summit a success. Was it? Tell us your thoughts as the lights are off, the speeches are made, and give us your thoughts about what we accomplished as a global community, as a multilateral organization of the UN with this Food System Summit.
Thank you, Trin, for the question, but also thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation. Listen, I joined the Food System Summit because I see a challenge every day that I live with. Since 2012, Trin, I met you when I was Minister of Agriculture, right? Since 2012, in that job, I saw farmers' hopes taken away every day. And when you've grown up in an agricultural system like myself, you get to associate your success with the next rain. You get to associate your success with the next crop, because that's what defines how you take kids to school. That's what defines how you can buy clothes for your children, right? So to be able to see that being taken away from people that I know, that's their only means of living, and to know that they actually don't even know how that's happening. So I received that telephone call, would you do this? And I'm like, by all means, mostly because I wanted to make sure that we help the world understand what is at stake here. What is at stake here is a whole lot of populations that actually are suffering because of climate change. Whether it is in Africa, on the equator, whether it is in parts of Asia, whether it is in small island states. But yes, also in many other countries, in the US, the wildfires in Australia, all these things are happening to our world. But these farmers that have the least are suffering the most. So I felt like someone had to do something about it in terms of mobilizing the world around it. In terms of how well we've done, my mind was really to make sure that I get to people other than member states. Member states, His Excellency Antonio Guterres spends his time with member states. He knows how they are thinking, right? So, but I'll come back to that point. So I felt like the most important thing was to get to everybody else. And the reason I thought it was important to get to everybody else is because I know solutions don't only sit with governments. I know solutions sit with many of us as well, institutions, constituencies like producers, like fishers. They too live with solutions to some of the world's problems that we live with. They too can do something about fixing our planet. And I felt like we all need to do something about fixing our planet. So we went out to mobilize people. We created spaces to ensure that people everywhere have an opportunity to meet. We call them independent dialogues. In those spaces, there were over 1,500 of them. In those spaces, women met and had conversations. Young people met and had conversations. Indigenous people met and had conversations. But we also then went back to member states and told them, listen, guys, we have a challenge here. By the way, most of them are guys. So we said, listen, guys, we have a problem here. And the problem is, we have too many silos in our food system that are not speaking to each other. We have sectors that are impacting our food system or are being impacted by our food system, but we are oblivious to the fact that this is happening. Whether it is the number of people that are malnourished, that shouldn't be malnourished, whether it is how we are impacting the environment, whether it is how we are degrading biodiversity so fast and yet we depend on it for its genetic resources. All these things are happening. And these are things we can do something about. But to do that, ministries have to sit and talk. Ministries have to have conversations. I think Suzanne mentioned it when she was saying how sectors can come together, how leaders need to secure that at the highest level. So that's how we started national dialogues, telling them that you actually need to drop your ministerial logos and egos and have a conversation. So presidents appointed what we call national conveners. Some of them and many of them are placed actually in the president's office or even the Ministry of Finance office, the most respected ministry. And because of that, they get to bring everybody together. They get to force the conversations, and the conversations were around, some of it has come out already, true cost of food. Why are we spending so much money dealing with diseases that can be prevented if we did the right thing? Why are we spending so much money investing in environmental damage when we could prevent it from the beginning. Catherine, you and I worked in Rwanda together when you were in World Food Program. We helped the government, we helped the government shift resources from Ministry of Health to invest in nutrition from a food processing perspective, food production and food processing perspective, that ensured that in Rwanda now we have food, we have nutritious food for 1,000 days, and the mothers that carry those children during that period. So that investment made sure that Ministry of Health does not have to worry about malnutrition, but they have to instead invest in ensuring that they never have those children coming to hospital. That's how you do the right thing from a food perspective. At the same time, of course, Rwanda is very well known for taking very tough decisions when it comes to protecting its environment. It's already too small. So we take very environmental decisions very seriously. So this whole thing has helped us now we have 148 governments having a conversation and dialogues. Already 101 of them made sure it was a race to the summit. 101 of them have already submitted those pathways with the clarity of how they are going to be convening, with the clarity of priorities, and with the clarity of how they are going to follow up. The other thing we did that is very important is the fact that we found solutions. We also went there and started looking for solutions and for answers. I mean, I always remember when I became Minister of Agriculture, the question for me was, what do I do next? Where do I go? Who do I go to for answers? We've made sure that with the solutions we've mobilized, now under 52 different clusters, if you're in sustainable livestock, you know who to go to, right? There are institutions behind sustainable livestock that are saying, this is what we should be doing from a sustainable livestock perspective, and these are the institutions behind it. So we're trying to make sure that there's one of the meetings that I would do immediately after all this is to make that connection. Can we ensure that the institutions that are behind this are making connection with the countries, so the countries know where to find answers, so that nobody says we don't know what to do? But then the last and most important thing, Catherine, is making sure that you and I understand what is at stake, that you and I understand that the choices we make every time we take a meal are very critical to the environment that we live with and how this environment survives into the future. So our job was to empower communities to think like that. And I feel like with 40,000 people watching yesterday and so many thousands that have been reached, I feel like we've been able to do that.
40,000 people watched yesterday. That's just amazing. So the question I'm sure those 40,000 people are asking is, now what? The Secretary General talked about stock taking in 2 years in Rome. What does that mean for those 40,000 people sitting out there, and even more importantly, for those who need to benefit from the outcomes of the summit?
So, excuse me, so food systems transformation, or even using food systems to contribute to SDGs, is going to be a journey. There's no one size fits all. It's so complex. Each country, and that's why maybe so many countries were willing to step forward. 155 countries, they finished today at midday, stepping forward and reading what they are going to do and committing. The energy of the commitment behind these statements was amazing. But anyway, food systems are so complex that we will have to think through what we do at each country in the next coming days, how we continue coordinating. There are three things that are very critical. The idea of how we mobilize finances, turn these great ideas into resource mobilization tools. We need to ensure that finances are available. They're not going, this thing is not going to happen by accident. Whether you live in the US or we live somewhere else, you saw that the President of the United States step forward, even commit to local context. So resources are going to be important. The next thing that is going to be important is governance. Governance means that how we come together as multi-stakeholders, first of all, as sectors that work in the food system and continue to work in the food system, not to work for hunger, not to work for environment, not to work for whatever, is very important. But also how we bring in other people, how we bring in civil society, who care about so many issues as you had them over the 20 months. How you bring in youth who have such a strong voice, how you bring in private sector, how you bring in producers and incorporate their views, how you understand that each one of them basically is your ally in ensuring that this environment survives is going to be very important. So those things are going to be important. Then the last one is innovation. And innovation can be looked at in a multiplicity of ways. But here I'm just going to make it simple and say, we have to continue innovating our way in the food system. We have to ensure that every challenge, we look at it as an opportunity that really provides an answer. We need to start greening our food systems, and the opportunities are there. We need to start investing in the right things. We need to start moving subsidies into other investments that are as great, and that will not kill the people that we are getting them, but really turn all these challenges into opportunities. So I think for me, innovation is going to be the other thing that we need to do. And then, of course, we need to come back and report. And the reason it's important to come back and report is because we are not starting at the same place. We need to give everybody an opportunity to understand what's happening, but also we need to hold each other accountable. We share this world. My people in Africa, the people I live with every day, the people I work for, are living through climate change, and they don't know how it happened. So what you do in other parts of the world is impacting them, but so is what they do. What they do too is impacting other people. And we need to understand how interconnected as the world we've become and how responsible for each other we are.
And holding people, each other accountable. That's a really great way of stating what is necessary for us to ensure that this is not just, again, in silos. And as you and your secretary did such a great job of making this truly a people summit, not just by title, but by how you engage the participation across the different sectors. But I would be remiss if I didn't ask you the tough question about, to those who felt like you included too much business and not enough indigenous population, not enough of those whose voices, the voices of particularly there were concerns about indigenous women. And as someone who as I know you as I do, these are the communities that you've spent your life, your professional career working to empower. And so I know that had to sting for you. But how do we move beyond the sting, move beyond the criticism to ensuring that we bring them into the work as we move forward, those who disagree?
So one of the things that has worked a lot as we went into this summit is also to listen and to try to, every time we had something that was different than where we're going, we try to understand what people are trying to tell us and try to move forward by incorporating what we are hearing. So yes, we did hear civil society, some in civil society, not all of them, some in civil society that were very concerned about corporate engagement. And they do have certain concerns that are very legitimate, and what we did was to actually start meeting them and to actually listen to them and start expressing those ideas. The question of trust with businesses, the question of living wages, the question of these subsidies that are doing the wrong things, all these things, we took them on board, we engaged around them, we had conversations around them. But unfortunately, they preferred to stay out, they didn't want to come in. But at least they were very clear on what the issues were, and we dealt with those issues in the summit. So that's number one. Number two, engaging some of the other people, like you said, Catherine, I pride myself. The only reason I'm in this summit, I don't have no corporate contacts that are important enough, but I do have producer contacts that are important enough to me. I do have smallholder contacts that are important enough to me, because that's the life I knew growing up. Those are the people I know, those are the people I live with. But so to say that we actually excluded them, that we don't care about their voices, that we don't care about what they stand for, I find it ridiculous. But in terms of what we did, we actually were reaching through the farmers associations that we are working with, whether it's the African Farmers Association or the Asian Farmers Federation. We're reaching 183 million farmers through them. Right? I can't go out there mobilizing every farmer, but we brought these people in, and these people actually are elected by these people to be able to represent them. Anyway, that's what was one thing. We did get into these groups and reach them, but we also had over 217, going to 300 now, indigenous people communities engaged across 7 regions of the world, bringing in millions of indigenous people that are living in these regions. And for me, the easiest way to put it is talk to the people that were engaged, find out if they have ever in their way of engagement had an opportunity to engage or be engaged like they were in this food system summit. That's the thing that I'm most proud of, that we actually managed to reach all these people and hear their views and really incorporate their views as we went.
So, I appreciate that very much. I think everyone here has been experienced with the United Nations, and I can't recall another UN summit or event where the level of engagement with civil society, community groups, indigenous people was so a part, not just of the preparations, but the outcomes of that event. So congratulations and kudos to you.
Thank you.
That's Isabel de Saint-Malo. As a former foreign minister and vice president of Panama, you and someone who has spent much of your career working in the United Nations, you know the challenges of coherence between differing parties. And the summit did a great job of making this the People Summit, but we're still in our silos of the food systems, the climate, the biodiversity, the water community. How do we bring together these different communities of actors and leaders to address what are crises affecting the same populations across the globe?
Well, thank you so much. And let me first of all congratulate Agnes and thank her for this fantastic work. Susanna, for your leadership with GWL and Earthering for a long time dedication to this important issue as well. As a member of GWL, I truly celebrate that we are dedicating this space for this conversation after such an important, actually one of a kind summit, as has been said already. As women leaders that advocate gender equality, we know from day one how central food systems and nutrition is to the SDG agenda and to women in general, which is why at GWL, one of the working groups that we established was particularly to look at this question. So we have been following the preparations for the summit and now about this fantastic results. Why women? Let's first ask ourselves, why women? Well, you've all referred to the problem of, and this is in every development problem, but particularly I believe when you talk about food systems, everything works in a silo. And the Sustainable Development Agenda and development agendas in general is about working together, is about bringing things together. And women, I believe we're born for collaboration. I believe that our strengths and our capacities make us of a particular possibility to bring that collaboration, which is what's going to be at the center for what comes next. Next, we need to take all of this collaboration and this knowledge and take it to the national level, to the local level, to the community level, to bring these puzzles together, to ensure that we do not hold in a vacuum these discussions, because we're not going to succeed in that way. I would like to highlight 3 main issues that I believe were very, very important from the summit. First of all, the value the summit has placed with having food systems at the core of the agenda in general. For too long, this has been an issue of agriculture. In countries, it's agriculture ministries that deal with this. For too long, this has also been an issue of having enough food to feed people in the world. But the summit has allowed us to see all of the different areas where this interconnects with the SDGs, how everything is locked around, how the different variety of people that the summit convenes from all levels and from all sectors, they cannot look at it from their own problem because everything is interconnected. We must also support how the summit raised awareness for women in particular. Just like COVID-19 placed awareness on the fact that women are in the essential workers in a vast majority. In that same way, I believe the summit has raised awareness to the fact that women are part of the food chain, are part of our farmers, not to mention the role that women play in terms of their households and having a healthy, nutritious diet. So in every way, I think that's also something that we need to value. The challenge of balancing food production and climate action, of course, that is at the center. And I celebrate, Earthering, that you've talked about corporate interest and that Agnes has shared with us some of that. And corporate interests are present in every discussion nowadays. That is not new. Industry interests that call, while science tells us that there is an issue with more cattle being raised and that this is raising temperatures, and that not only meat consumption is augmenting because the population is augmenting, but meat consumption per capita is also augmenting. In spite of all of this, we have seen in the preparation towards the summit, industry leaders trying to call for a boost in global meat consumption. So this cannot be. We cannot, we live in a world where more and more we find contempt, and more we find polarization, political polarization. And we need to be aware that this polarization cannot translate to everybody looking for their own interest and their own benefit, because at the end, we're all going to pay a big price for that. So I think that with the summit putting the concentration on the importance of balancing food production and climate action, and highlighting what scientists have been saying for a long time in terms of these impacts, and what farmers also have known for a long time, I think that is a second very important issue that has been risen by the summit. And I would like to mention a third, which is related to trade. COVID-19 placed stress on many things, trade being one of them, chains of supply chains being one of them. And now the food summit has allowed us to see how vulnerable food chains are to this as well. And this is just too risky to have households and families see their everyday intake challenged because trade is being affected by a pandemic. How do governments go back to, we've been talking a long time about food security. Well, food security has a reason. And I think COVID-19 and other challenges that we've had recently in this way place that importance on why food security is important. I remember while I was vice president, I also had the responsibility of chairing the social cabinet. And Susana already mentioned, within governments, agriculture is dealt with by the agricultural minister. And those of us that have sat at a cabinet table, we know that the level of, or the weight of messages and the weight of agendas are related to different things. One of them being resources, financial resources. I would say that mostly all over, whoever holds the finances has a very important place at the table. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't necessarily happen all the time with the agricultural minister. So yes, we do need to place at a higher level the leadership for food systems, because yes, there will be trade-offs. There will be choices to be made that will affect different interest groups, different communities, different even agendas within a cabinet. So the leadership needs to be at a higher level. And at the social cabinet, we found this constant struggle, because the social is there, and the economy is there, and labor is there, and it's very difficult to say what's more important. Well, the fact is that all of this needs to work together. And I think that's the beauty of this summit, bringing everything together. And another thing I would like to mention, Eartha, regarding the next steps, I think there's one thing that's most important. And it's taking this knowledge and this conversation and bringing it to the local level. The dialogues that have happened around the world to prepare for the summit were not the most important thing. The road towards the Food System Summit, I don't believe was the most important thing. It was very, very important, but I think the most important road is the one that needs to be traveled now, from the summit on. Having learned everything that we have learned, how do we take this to the local level so that governments ensure that their citizens appropriate of the agenda, understand the linkages, the challenges, the silos that cannot be anymore, and these agendas at the micro level then put to test those ideas that Agnes was talking about. More than 2,000 ideas for innovation and solving problems. Well, those, to test them, it's not going to be at the UN, and it's not going to be at a cabinet table. It's going to be where the farmers are. It's going to be where the supply chains are. So we need to take it to that level, and to me, that would be the most important thing moving forward.
And very much appreciate that, taking it to the local level and getting the work performed in context of each of the countries, because that was one thing that was said by many of those who spoke over the last 2 days, was the recognition of what was necessary for the food systems transformation in their individual countries. Now, no one who spoke today talked about the global change that was necessary. They each spoke about their pathways forward for their own country. But each of you has also talked about finances as a part of this, and the need for additional finance. And I've noticed a challenge here, and that is while we talk about food systems from a climate standpoint, as adaptation tools that we need to address food systems. When we talk about mitigation as well, we also need to talk about food systems. We know from the most recent IPCC report that agriculture particularly contributes to a significant amount to the man-made greenhouse gases, particularly methane. But when the climate leaders talk about what is necessary to make the change to address the challenges of climate, they talk about transportation and energy. You rarely, if ever, hear a climate leader talk about the agriculture investment that is necessary. And while we know that there is a commitment to $100 billion for change, much of that is being talked about going to transportation and to energy. Again, no one is talking about those climate dollars going into agriculture. In fact, as the countries prepare for Glasgow, the NDCs are supposed to be enhanced. They're supposed to present enhanced NDCs. The Paris NDCs don't include agriculture, don't include food system. So you just heard from Agnes that 148 countries spoke and 101 have already given their pathways forward. How do we get them to put those pathways and those action items into their NDC so we can ensure that the finances that are necessary to make that local change that you just talked about, Marie, and this is for each one of you, starting with you, Susanna. You've all worked in governments, you've worked in the UN system. How do we make the change that is necessary to include this level of ambition that was articulated by that country that spoke into their climate discussions now? Let's start with you, Susanna.
Well, first of all, it is clear that the buzz that has generated this Food Systems Summit needs to be retained, needs to be sustained. So my first suggestion will be that we bring this buzz to Glasgow. Agnes, I'm adding to your job. I mean, I think it's very critical that this energy that has been created moves to Glasgow. I don't believe that we are going to be able to change the agenda that has already been set in Glasgow. So it is what it is, and we will not have an outcome, a deliverable in Glasgow. But if we are able to make this a high priority there, if civil society mobilizes behind this, if the youth are so central to the climate change agenda, really start to connect the dots. Again, everything is about connecting the dots. My view is that we stand a chance that for COP27, which by the way will be held in Africa, how significant that is, then this becomes part of what is going to be the central theme in COP27. Some of you have said this is a journey, this is not going to happen overnight, no question. The fact that agriculture is missing in action in the Paris commitments is very telling. Mm-hmm. We also need to recognize that there are many tensions here, many tensions between the developed and the developing world. No new news here on the question of agriculture. But we also have to recognize that food systems go beyond agriculture. So everything is complex. I add again that complexity to my comment. But if we are able to bring that buzz into Glasgow, I have no doubt that the chances to make this part of the agenda in COP27 in Africa are very high. And that is a major step that I will say is on us to deliver.
So we need to take this to Glasgow. Agnes, you've been telling everybody you have a day job, but now we've just said you need to take this to Glasgow. How do you respond? What can we do to take this to Glasgow?
So thank you. So first of all, let's recognize that even food systems does still have a lot of work to do to appreciate and recognize the changes that are necessary to do in the food system. So those 2 years, coming back every 2 years to look at the progress, part of that is create that kind of COP26 type of energy where you actually get COP26, COP27, where you actually have a frequency of meeting and continue ensuring that the issues that should be on the table are at the table. So first of all, let's secure that from a food systems perspective. Next, as we go into this COP26, we need to be very clear around the role that the agricultural sector plays. So I feel like part of what we've done in this whole summit was to raise the awareness and the fact that people are just burying their heads in the sand by not engaging the sector or these sectors, the food sector itself. Right? Again, too much logos and egos and failing to understand that the degradation is coming from a certain part, and that can be helped. A lot of that can be helped. But also the funding part. We invited and we did bring in the CEO of the Green Climate Fund, and he's offering, he said, we will double our agriculture related funding to 20%. And I'm like, no, 20% is not enough. We are contributing 30-something%. You probably need to, you're coming from somewhere to double, you're coming from 10% to 20%. You probably need to be asking yourself whether what you're doing is enough. But it's not just him, it's also all the countries that are associated with ensuring that these resources become available. We need to be very clear around the case of the food system and its contribution. But then we also need to be prepared to deal with that challenge once it becomes very clear. I feel we've all been hiding behind the fact that there was no clarity. Now there's sufficient clarity. And in terms of following up, I'll just give you an example of the African continent. The African continent has come up with what they're calling a common position on food systems, but they've gone a step further. They are willing to amend continental frameworks to incorporate food system measures so that they stop tracking individual measures. So that's just to show you how serious they are, that they are willing to go that extra mile. And I'm going to stop here because I need to go to the next meeting. So if you allow me to drop off.
So before you go, let me ask you one question, because that was my closing question, and I'll let the other panelists answer that question, because we're on YouTube Live, and we'll push this out afterwards. If you had a piece of advice to give to the Rome-based agencies as they carry this forward and become the accountability framework for the global community, what would you say?
I mean, the Food System Summit yesterday and today is the first day of the food system. People need to roll up their sleeves, and it's going to be them rolling up their sleeves and getting to work. The world is ready. We don't have a moment to waste. My job was to make sure that the world is ready for that type of energy coming from Rome. So they need to take advantage of the momentum.
Well, thank you very much. And we appreciate you taking this time after this remarkable accomplishment of 40,000 people participating in the summit itself, after 100,000 people participated in its preparation. I'll say what I say that is not very professional, but you go, girl, you did this. Congratulations.
Thanks, Agnes. Thanks so much.
Thank you. It was good to be part of this conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So as Agnes drops off, I'm going to come back to first you, Isabel, and then over to Susanna to ask that same question. You see, Susanna, you've worked in Rome. Isabel, you've worked in New York and for a very long time in both a ministerial capacity as well as in a member of the UN family. What advice would you give to the Rome-based agencies to ensure that we keep the same level of momentum to support the kind of ambitious efforts that we've been discussing here today?
I think momentum comes when we have reality hit us in the face, which is part of what the food system has done. And we need to continue to put that and put it in everyone's face. And I believe we can achieve that through these dialogues at the local and national level that I've mentioned. But let me share with you a very brief reference and story of my own country, because I think that's what the kind of things that we need to put pressure and move forward. In my own country, Panama, we have a waterway, a canal that serves the world, that was built over 100 years ago by the United States and has been very important in terms of global trade. With this canal built over 100 years ago, Panama has been blessed with water, a lot of water always, was built in such a way that all of the fresh water from rivers utilized for every transit was dumped into the ocean, just like that. And we're talking about a lot of water being dumped into the ocean. It took the pressure of what would happen if the canal, which is a very important source of revenue for the Republic of Panama, if the canal was one day not able to transit as many transits because we lacked water. So an updated canal was built, and this new canal has a water saving system. But what pushed that decision? Finances pushed that decision. The reality in our face. And the thing is, we have the same situation with climate, and we have the same situation with the impact of food systems in climate, but it's not evident to everyone. It is not evident at all. So next steps, definitely. We cannot let this momentum of this conversation come down. I agree with the importance of youth. I think that that's very important. I have a lot of faith when I listen to younger generations, their concern of these issues. I have a lot of concern and trust there. And I would say that the variety of public policies that need to be pushed to take into consideration the recommendations of the summit in terms of fair compensations for farmers in terms of water sustainability, in terms of gender balance, consumption habits, climate change, a national agenda. We have already some of the commitments, fine, but we have also seen with the Paris agreements experience that that's not enough. The national commitments are not enough unless they are owned by citizens, they are owned by people. So to me, this is a very critical next step, pushing these dialogues and bringing this agenda closer to home and to people's hearts so that it's a bottom-up also approach.
Well, it's a bottom-up approach, but the governance and the accountability for those bottom-up actions will come from Rome. Susanna, you helped lead the World Food Program, and were very instrumental in building the relationship between the three Rome-based agencies. And you've talked today about the importance of keeping this at the political level. What advice would you give to the agencies as we push out this video to those who are working in those agencies today?
Well, first of all, I praise those agencies. They have done an amazing job in the different roles they have, FAO, World Food Program, and IFAD. I mean, the three of them have roles that have been significant. But what we need to recognize that this is not a Rome-centric issue. This is a world-centric issue, and the world meets in New York. There is no doubt about that. So sometimes I find that is sort of a natural to get a little bit defensive, a little bit protective of being in Rome and keeping things in Rome. Normally in Rome, I've seen ministers of agriculture. I haven't seen many presidents, many prime ministers going to Rome. Sometimes they do, sometimes they show up. But naturally, this is the realm of the ministers of agriculture. If we are consistent with what we have been saying up till here, Rome needs to connect more strongly with the political level in New York. We haven't spoken about the security aspects of the food systems. The fact that climate change is affecting the food systems, but it's also affecting security. So it's not only the view of how to transform the food systems on their own, it's all the connections they have given the challenges the world faces. So for me, my recommendation will be connect more strongly with New York. I remember when I was there, one of the things I had to do was that responsibility. I was the liaison with New York. And in general terms, it was felt like a little bit of an extra job, an extra work. Well, it's central. If you want your issue to be relevant, it has to be connected with the political discussions in New York, because that's the only way to make the transformations that the food system needs.
Well, that's a great way to conclude our conversation today, because you've said it, the Rome-based agencies do a great job. And Isabel, you noted that the work is actually on the ground. And supporting that work on the ground, the technical capacity that is necessary will definitely come from the Rome-based agency. But the political drive that we need to keep the momentum going must come from New York. And so it is going to be incumbent upon those who are committed to these issues to ensure that the leaders in New York, as well as in capitals where the work is happening and in Rome, remain connected. That is what made this summit successful over the past 2 days. That is what will ensure that we will achieve a just and sustainable transformation of our food system for people, for our planet, and for prosperity. I thank you all for joining in. We're going to push this conversation out on YouTube because it's important that many people hear what was talked about here today so that we can continue to move forward. Susanna, Isabel, and to my friend Agnes, thank you all for participating.
Thank you.
So much.
Thanks, Catherine.
You're welcome.
Thank you.